So I'm a man and a minority, which makes me
Mhm.
very rare in educational spaces in general.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so sometimes I like to speak to that, especially
Mhm.
when I'm talking to educators. And burnout is actually more of a female issue and problem. And a lot of them are not comfortable talking about it for the fear that they'll be seen as incapable,
Mm.
let alone BIPOC women. And then bam, here come all the stereotypes, right?
Right. Right.
Loud, hard, strong, boom,
Yeah.
brass, boom, boom, boom. Okay.
Go ahead.
And we still have systems that are set up where women, especially, don't feel safe acknowledging
Mhm.
burnout or
Mhm.
stress
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
overwhelm. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think that, of course, just like you said about other groups that we've talked about who might be in the minority, I think in this case, in my industry, we have a majority group that might be uncomfortable raising their hand and saying that they're struggling because they
Mhm.
don't want to seen as incapable. They don't want to, you know what I mean, ask for additional accommodations and things like that. So
Yeah.
definitely that type of statistic, I think, is often overlooked because institutions are built on the backs of a lot of people, but are
Mhm.
often sustained by the power and the ingenuity and the intelligence and stuff that women contribute to these spaces. And it can often go overlooked, under promoted,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Peace, my people. Welcome to I Must Be BUGN, where we have honest, relatable conversations packed with powerful insights that spark curiosity and help melanated, gifted, and neurodivergent folks feel seen, safe, and celebrated. Here, labels don't have to feel like pathology, and complexity feels comfortable.
Articulate.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm just riffing off of your greatness, but thank you. Yeah, because like I said, that's really it too. It's like, you know, um, recognizing that there's no endowment. This is running on that person's battery, right? And so, um, so like, I guess to that end, and to kind of just um begin to round things out, like what happens when organizations fail to address these concerns? We've talked about them a little bit, but like, are there other things that you wanted to point
Mhm.
out as it relates to like what happens when people fail to address these concerns?
I think bottom line, there is real loss there that you
Hmm.
can measure,
Hmm.
right? So retention.
Hmm.
Retention in a whole host of spaces is down in terms of people wanting to stay and kind of volunteer to stay as
Hmm.
a part of these communities. I think churches have seen it in other religious
Hmm. Hmm.
organizations. I think community centers have seen it. You know, if you're not kind of the big box YMCA,
Hmm.
there
Hmm.
used to be more neighborhood community spaces,
Hmm.
and they used to give job training. They used to have reentry programs. There was a lot of things, you know,
Hmm.
but some of those spaces lost investment. Some of those spaces came under new leadership from outside of the community, you know, and there is a real noticeable cost that can be felt in my home neighborhood, right? Like
Hmm.
in my
Hmm.
hometown when these things start to happen. I think in education, teachers are leaving the profession. And in universities, this is kind of a generic statement, but
Hmm.
some schools of education are that people are losing interest. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Where people might not choose to major in that when they can major in cybersecurity, you know,
Hmm.
some of these other majors that I've heard my own students, because I'm in a K-12 space, wanting to go into. And so
Hmm.
if you don't have teachers, the ones you have are starting to leave, and
Hmm.
there's not just new blood and kind of new
Right.
energy that's going to push through, then spaces start closing and you start to have really complicated situations
Hmm.
where I'm in a private school space. And
Hmm.
so, and my mom was an alternative school principal. So it doesn't matter. You're not insulated all because you're charter, all because
Hmm.
you're private, all because your teachers are literally having to combine classes because
Hmm.
the teacher was out sick and there's not enough subs who are interested in doing the work. And now I've doubled my class size and I have to teach them in the auditorium.
Right.
That is what is
Right.
happening. Like, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? You're losing thoughtful people. You're losing creativity. You're losing bandwidth. I know people don't want to hear the soft skills thing. You focus on the hard number of what is the experience like of a child? What is it
Hmm.
a child in that classroom and their connection to these teachers. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's a big risk to take to not be doing this work.
Mhm.
It's a big risk to take, and people are already feeling the impacts on their community and on their culture.
Yeah. And I just want to circle back to, or bring in points that you made earlier about we earlier were sharing how many decisions a teacher is making throughout the day, and that was just kind of in a standard scenario, right?
Sure.
If you're talking about these like doubling or whatever multiple of the the standard scenario, that increases those numbers of decisions and the complexity of those decisions, right? So there's that impact on the teacher. But I also want to make sure that I also highlight what you just brought up, which is so important, right? It's
Mm,
the experience of the child. I think in a lot of these cases, we lose sight of children's humanity and what it feels like to be a child. It's an interesting thing because I think
mm,
our life journey. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and we were talking about probably one of the hardest things about being a child is the lack of agency, right?
yes.
Because you're sitting there and you're like, I even if I know this ain't right or this doesn't work, what can I do? I don't feel like I have the power to do anything about it, and that, as a human being, is really really challenging. And
Yes.
so, in this particular case, we're talking about being in a classroom where
Hmm.
maybe you already felt, like you weren't getting enough attention or whatever it is. You
Yeah.
felt challenged
Mhm.
by your scenario
Sure.
already. Now there's however many other, extra kids in here. And as we bring up this like neurodivergence piece, you know, all of a sudden sensory stuff starts to, like, I mean, whatever level of sensory challenge you may have had, you're now doing the calculations around sound, light, you
Yes.
know smells, right?
Yeah.
All this other extra stuff, right, that's coming into play. But I think again that in a lot of these scenarios we do lose sight of, okay, if let's say that we've already talked about how it's not sustainable for teachers, but let's just
Mm,
assume that
mm,
teachers and adults can take it. Like, we know that those children right now are not prepared to do that on a long-term basis. And
yes.
so that has to be an impetus to do this work as well. And why I'm so glad that, like I said, you're one of the folks who are like at the forefront of doing this work and making sure that folks are addressing these concerns, because yeah, man, like our most vulnerable populations, we
Right.
have to be making sure that we're doing work for. Yeah.
That's so good. That's so good. That's very true. Because teachers are leaving mid-year,
mm.
and they might be replaced with someone who's not licensed,
Right. Right.
who doesn't know
Right.
your IEP.
Yep.
And there
Right.
are students who have things where they're very sensitive to rejection, even in terms
Mm-hmm.
of their own. And so
Mm-hmm.
when their teacher just doesn't come back after spring break,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
attachment, as a
Mm-hmm.
kid, that attachment can feel like, did you do something? Did your friends do something? You know what I
Yes.
mean? It can be taken very personally. And
Yes.
there's more and more teachers who, and again, we can talk about standardization. There's problems with certification. We can get
Mm-hmm.
in, we can
Right.
get
Right.
in.
Right. Right. Right.
But to
Right.
have
Right.
someone who's not certified and might not have even a teaching background kind of being a warm adult body in the space
Mm-hmm.
is concerning, because we want more than just child care. We want education.
Mm-hmm. 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 No. No.
And it's supposed to be a
That's
basic
a
human right from the
that
United Nations. They're supposed to have a right to that.
that's a bar right there, because right, it is not just about this warm body that is, at least looking around and making sure no one's jumping off the top of a desk or something, right? Like, you do want this piece of the education. And um yeah, like that, when you're just saying get a body in there, an
Yeah.
adult body in there, you lose sight of that. And that's certainly not good enough.
Yes.
Is there excuse me, we've shared a couple of different stats. Are there any other
Mm.
stats that you wanted to make sure that you shared, or was there like one stat as you're doing your work that you were like, oh my gosh, like this blew my mind when I heard this?
That's a really good question. Um, I think one of the things that I sometimes come back to, depending on the group that I'm in, is really centering women.
Mm,
Um, Education in general is a female-dominated industry.
mhm,
So I'm a man and a minority, which makes me
mhm,
very rare in educational spaces in general.
mhm, mhm,
And so sometimes I like to speak to that, especially
mhm,
when I'm talking to educators. And burnout is actually more of a female issue and problem. And a lot of them are not comfortable talking about it for the fear that they'll be seen as incapable,
mm.
let alone BIPOC women. And then bam, here come all the stereotypes, right?
Right, right,
Loud,
right.
hard, strong, boom,
Yeah,
brass, boom, boom, boom. Okay, so now we're in the soft era, is what I've been told.
soft area.
Okay,
Yeah, go ahead,
now
go
we're in
ahead,
the
go
soft
ahead, go
era,
ahead.
is what I've been
Yeah,
told.
go ahead.
And we
Right.
still have systems that are set up where women, especially, don't feel safe acknowledging burnout or
Mhm,
stress
mhm,
or
mhm.
overwhelm. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think that, of course, just like you said about other groups that we've talked about who might be in the minority, I think in this case, in my industry, we have a majority group that might be uncomfortable raising their hand and saying that they're struggling because they
Mhm.
don't want to seem as incapable. They don't want to, you know what I mean, ask for additional accommodations and things like that. So
Yeah.
definitely that type of statistic, I think, is often overlooked because institutions are built on the backs of a lot of people, but are
Mhm.
often sustained by the power and the ingenuity and the intelligence and stuff that women contribute to these spaces. And it can often go overlooked, under promoted,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And we could go on from there. So,
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that, and it's actually just clicked in my mind. I just finished reading a book called For the Love of Men. I will, and I
mm,
mentioned it in another episode, but like it's funny how this keeps coming back
yeah,
for different reasons. But one of the things that it brought up was one, the teaching as a profession used to be male dominated,
right.
and then it shifted. Um, and there's a whole conversation about why that is.
Mm,
But I primarily bring it up because one of the challenges that happened on the other side is this, like you said, there's this part about what we as a society have placed, like expectations that we've placed on women in society, and how it can be harder
mm,
in certain scenarios, like you said, to raise your hand and not and basically not wanting to reaffirm some of these, stigmas or like negative,
yeah, the
um,
misogyny. Yeah.
yeah, like the misogyny, right? Around what else? Like, okay, well, you can't take care, like, whatever,
Hmm.
right? These
Oh,
all
yeah.
these all these different things, right? And so um it's really important to, yeah, again, start to speak to these things and call these things out, particularly um I know, again, as you kind of spoke about or at least alluded to, right, that frankly, a lot of these teachers are white women, right? But there's a very small percentage of them who represent, a global majority, as it were,
Right.
right? And so,
Hmm.
there's this challenge of, again, if I'm raising my hand in this system, like, what is that going to mean for me, my job, you know, my ability to influence all these different things, right? And so, um, yeah, we can have a whole conversation, just about that. But I'm glad that you brought that up because it is definitely, um, it's definitely something to be reflected on as it relates to, the education system and why some of the things. So there's some of the challenges that exist, and how do we build a more um, equitable and effective way of educating and caring for our youth,
Yes.
as they come through. And a key part of that is of course making sure that those who are responsible for it are in the best position, right, to do that. And so
Hmm.
um, okay. Anything else that there's a couple of questions that I ask everybody, but I wanted to make sure that if you had anything else you wanted to kind of tag onto that, I leave space for it. Otherwise, you know, let's get to the tail end of this fish.
Yeah, that's good. I think we can talk about some, not solutions, but like steps and ways of addressing, because I think when people hear all this, let's say they're actually already someone who agrees with a lot of what they're saying, or they're even being persuaded by some of the storytelling, by some of the stats and the research that we've been sharing in this space. I think sometimes people are a little bit too quick to try to solve something like burnout. And one small example of this would be just like boundaries. Like, I need to set boundaries, protect my peace. So
Right, 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 right.
you know what I mean? They get the Orange Theory membership. They're working on, you've seen
Horse
it.
theory membership is
Alkaline
hilarious.
water. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
Or they, immediately go to their boss and start making it very clear
yeah.
what they need to protect their peace. And so, hold up. Let's talk about that a little bit, because exactly what you said, like, what are the consequences if I do this? And I think from a leadership perspective, if you feel like you have a problem, it doesn't mean you have a problem.
Yeah.
Right. So every institution has attrition, like people who
Mhm,
leave the community. Okay.
mhm.
Some people matriculate, some people, and so what is your threshold for that, right? Like, what
Yes,
evidence
yes,
are you willing to accept?
yeah,
What's normalized around peer schools in my
yeah.
case? And so there really is kind of an auditing or an investigation or a threat analysis, if you will, that needs to happen before we start building fences. Like,
Yes,
building walls, building fences,
yes.
boundaries, taking back their peace, all this. And it's like there needs to be a little bit more time for contextualized problem
Hmm.
diagnosis, problem analysis, giving people
Hmm.
time to share their stories and to listen. The
Yeah,
listening is sometimes missed when we hop a little bit too quickly to just investing in solutions, even if it's from the research that we
right.
think we can kind of copy and paste in big box onto our institutions.
I love this on so many different levels. I
Mm,
mean, I forget where it was, but I was sharing with someone recently, right? The importance of understanding, like, folks who come in and are just throwing solutions at anything, and you're like, well, have you ever actually asked, the people who are there? Have you actually assessed
right.
what it is that we're trying to fix? Because, you know, uh, the simple thing, right, is like not um, everything requires a hammer, but everything looks like a nail if that's all you're,
Whoa.
willing to put in your hand, right? And
Whoa.
and so,
Like,
like, so what you're speaking to, right, is that, yeah, like, there will always be people who will come, there will people who will go. Like, that's the issue isn't that anyone left, right?
yeah.
It's the fact that if I remember, there was a place that I worked, and I won't name that place, but there's a
Mm,
place I worked. Within 6 months of me leaving, there were 5 other people who had been there however many years, but that had my role. Every single one of them had left,
wow.
and
No, that's
it
crazy.
was like,
Hmm.
wait a second. Now, again, there's some people gonna come, there's some people, but like, if you get there and every other person who was in your role leaves, that's different, right? And so that means that we should be looking at, well, what's going on here,
Right.
right? And
Yeah, I love
yes,
that.
like, and pulling this data. But I think one of the challenges is for some other organizations, or so for some organizations is, I'm thinking about another organization, is that it can be tough to ask those questions
Yeah.
because people don't want the answer,
Yes.
because often the answer means I've got to do work, particularly that leader as you go further up the chain, right? Um, it asks questions of them that maybe they're not ready to, invest money in, because it's interesting when there was
Mm,
something that you said when I was thinking about, sorry, something that you said made me think about this, the value of investing into, I mean, I guess the short story is really about these soft skills, right? Like, I think a lot of times, if you are just looking at these things as whatever, like, boxes to check, as opposed to ways that you're adding value to this ecosystem of support and community that you're building, right? Like, that's when it's like, okay, fine, go have your, you know,
Mhm, mhm.
whatever it is, right? And but you get back here to do like, you know what I mean? And it's like, well, hold on. This is actually, you know, building, you know, the oh gosh, why is my brain not giving me the word? But this is building the scaffolding, right, for keeping this thing together and swaying. You know, as the wind blows throughout our year, this is what's keeping us together. It is not just, you know, people coming into an office and sitting at a desk and, you know, sending off X number of emails or whatever per day. Like that's not it. And so yeah, like I said, when you brought up a really said a good point about
Mm,
truly understanding where you are, what is going to be your threshold, and then starting to reset and invest, you know, from there. Um, because yeah, like not every school, not every organization, going back to what I was saying earlier, right? Like not every relationship, friendship, family member, or otherwise is the same. Um, and I think that is again where a lot of people um, kind of get off track. But um, okay, let me ask you the questions I ask everybody as we leave, which is,
sure.
you know, what are 1 to 2 things, right? 1 to 2 keys to neurodivergent healing and thriving
Mm.
that you'd like to share with folks.
I feel like, you know how I was talking about speed as intelligence?
Mm,
Have to get away from that.
yeah, yeah,
In our spaces, we have to start really putting value behind and recognition behind things other than speed
yes,
and things other than making problems go away. It's like the fire extinguishers are the
Mhm.
people always getting promoted.
Yes,
You know, and I'm
yes,
not saying like, "Oh, disruptors," you know what I mean? But there's lots of different types of people who are in these spaces, right? It's just like
hmm
biasing extroverts over introverts. It's arbitrary,
yes,
and you can be missing out on something that I think we all agree, you know, it's pretty obvious.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so what are we really valuing when we have these core values? We want to see it play out in a certain way with certain types of personalities, and there's some implicit bias there. And so I
yes,
think implicit bias training
hmm
helps. I
hmm
think having spaces where it's safe to unmask
hmm
helps.
hmm
And one other thing, as I was preparing, I was thinking about this, thinking about predictable rhythms as well
hmm
in the workplace.
hmm
'Cause I think too many things are spare of the moment or impromptu when
hmm
they could have
hmm
been a little bit more structured. And I think that's what some people are getting at when they said this meeting could have been an email.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, yeah, there could have been an email sent out before the meeting where
hmm
you gathered feedback in writing, where people were a little bit more aware so that you can really get the thoughts of everyone. I think in some of the workspaces I've been at,
hmm
leaders like to do performative democracy on
hmm
decision making,
hmm
but it's authoritarian. Like you're the person with the role, with the paycheck, with the budget codes, with the so you're
right,
going to make the decision, even if the whole kind of faculty says, "Oh, we'd like this type of schedule." You're going to print a different schedule in the planner. So why are we meeting and talking about things that are really under your purview? So let's not
right,
pretend democracy. Let's not have meetings that where we're
right,
looking for consensus and doing exercises for consensus building when you
yeah,
could really, and I think this is the hard part, you could lead, you can make a decision, and when it doesn't work out, you have to apologize.
yeah,
That would
yeah,
help our any community, but I think especially for the neurodivergent who are often put on the back foot of them having to apologize for lack of speed, lack of, I
yeah,
didn't talk enough in the meeting. I'm super socially aware. The noise is bothering me. The
hmm
no, no, you don't have to be in a space of apology. If leaders would lead, and then they have to fall on that. They have to eat that if they make a decision. They can't just say, "Oh, well, we came up with this in committee," and hide
hmm
behind the committee. Well, the board said, and hide behind the board. I
hmm
think it calls for a different level of accountability, just to be clear, just to be consistent.
hmm
You know what I mean? And just to give
yeah,
people a heads up. And so I think closing some of those feedback loops are definitely the things that I would think would lead to real practical healing and thriving in the spaces that I work with.
yeah. I love that, and just in the interest of time, I only touch on one of the points because I
Sure.
mean, I think it's important for this community. So I love everything that you're saying, but like the one thing I would touch on is this talk about speed as intelligence. Because I think there's an important point to be made here that can speak to everything that you shared, which
Mm,
is, I'll say, before we even started this call, one of the things you were asking me about is kind of like how, talk about my journey. And one of the
yeah.
things I shared was that I recognize that I should be doing this work because I recognize that my mind works more quickly than most people.
Good.
Um, and I share that, one, to say that, one, for me, it never, until, whatever, my early 40s, it never, for me, was never something where I like use that as a definition of me being better than anyone. It was just like, in fact, I thought most people's minds worked worked like that, right?
Mhm,
But
mhm,
what I also know is that, going back to this thing of the neurodivergence, your mind in various spaces and various scenarios, particularly as we age, that speed may not be the same.
wow.
And if you only feel intelligent if you're going at whatever lightning pace, that's a tough place to be. If you have a brain injury, if you
Mhm,
are, as we're talking about with burnout, your mind does not work as quickly and as complexly
right.
as it
Oh,
typically would, right?
that's
And
good.
so, understanding, hey, like, we need to make spaces for, one, to recognize intelligence outside of this sort of one definition, but we also need to recognize, like, these things are dynamic and not static. And if someone's not showing up in this other way, this is
Mhm,
not an opportunity to punish them or point a finger. It's an opportunity to get curious and
yeah.
ask what's happening here, right? If everybody is kind of like starting to seem like they're in a brain fog around
Mhm,
here, what
mhm,
is that telling us, right? And it should not be crack the whip,
right.
turn, like, get back. Like, that's no, no, no. Oh, wait a second.
Mhm,
Hmm.
mhm,
There's, and the last thing I'll just say to that point too is that, again, making space for the fact that, you know, it may take longer for someone to get somewhere doesn't mean that what they have to share is less valuable. Um,
mhm,
so creating spaces where you have that ability to kind of be flexible around all those things is really, I'm glad that you, again, everything that you shared, but I think, hopefully that kind of touches on all the things that you were talking about.
yeah.
um, and so, what are maybe one to two things you wish the world knew or
Mm.
built more capacity for?
So, Peter Atwater, he has this thing called confidence mapping. People can
Mm,
look it up. And basically, he talks about what builds a person's confidence.
mm-hmm,
And he kind of boiled it down to clarity and certainty. You
mm,
know,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
if I look into my
Absolutely.
future and I actually have certainty about where this thing is headed, that
Yeah,
can really help me be a lot more confident. You know,
absolutely.
if the objectives that I'm hearing are clear and clearly articulated, right? If I kind of understand why a change happened and it was
Yeah.
communicated in a way that I can understand,
Mm-hmm,
that helps. I think people don't like being caught off guard. And so I wish we had more capacity for confidence building in that way. And
mm-hmm,
not just in like the self esteem, not just in the why and purpose, but in some of these very practical ways of taking what's unclear and slowing down, perhaps,
mm-hmm,
or even communicating the vision in several ways, right? It's not always the standard keynote address and the
mm-hmm,
slide deck that's going to galvanize morale and vision. There might be lots of different ways where you can still do mission fulfillment, where
mm-hmm,
you can still be mission aligned that are going to resonate and move different types of groups, right? And I've
mm-hmm,
seen heads of school move into more roundtable conversations where the
mm-hmm,
cap on that might be 10 participants. And
mm-hmm,
now in a larger community, you're meeting with small group after small group after small group. You have the same three things to talk about, but you're letting people hear and engage and ask questions and tug on it versus having that distance of kind of being up on the podium in the auditorium and delivering something that's much more traditional. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I wish we had more capacity because that takes a lot, you know, to
Yeah.
break it down to those groups, right? But I
Yeah.
do wish we had more capacity for that type of engagement with people.
Yeah. No, I love this. Two very quick points, as it relates to this community that's listening. When we think about neurodivergence, there are many of us who, um, that lack of clarity, right, can be extremely disruptive, right?
Mm,
Um, you know, so when we think about, again, why does the confidence mapping help everybody? There's this larger piece, right? But then there's also this piece about, if we were starting from our most vulnerable
hmm.
and asking what would help them, we could also have found our way to this, right? Because the most vulnerable people were like, look, I don't know what's about to happen. I don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very like protective of what's in my space. And if you are finding ways to make those people feel more safe, all of a sudden it's like everybody benefits from this level of clarity about what's happening. And diving into that level of curiosity, it's making me think about the second thing that I was just going to mention very quickly, which is like,
Hmm.
um literally today I happened to see this thing on Threads where there's this really cool paper airplane video. Maybe I'll share it, maybe I won't, but the point is that there was a guy under there like making a comment about how it wasn't efficient. Or if, like, he's like, this looks really cool, but for like using one piece of paper, like it could be more efficient essentially. And so
Mm.
I started with just asking him, how are you defining efficiency? Tell me more about it. This guy turns out like used to be in paper plate airplane like competitions or whatever. And so he explained to me about, generally speaking, in like a competition, the further the paper airplane flies, that's like, graded higher. And I was like, well, now I understand, right? So we started from this place of like, we're sharing these things, we're kind of critiquing these things, but we're not sort of being clear about what's going on. But now when we get clarity about it, I can totally get that, because I used to love taking a glider out of the top apartment window and throwing it out and seeing how far it could go. But I also mentioned to him, and this again goes back to this whole dynamic of like understanding the space that you're in and speaking in a way that acknowledges that the space that we're in may not be reflective of, in this case, a competition. I said to him,
Mm.
well, it may be that you may live in a place where you don't have the space to let it go super far, but you really like the fact that it looks like a fighter jet. And so that doesn't, like, there's
Wow.
value, right? But if you don't break
Mm-hmm.
this down and kind of really understand what's going on, you
Yeah.
miss an opportunity to see the beauty in what exists. And so, um,
Yes.
yeah, man, like I'm loving everything that you're sharing. And again, this is why I was super, super excited about this. But we'll be here. You definitely got to come back another time. So let's just put that, on the books at some point. But having said that,
Mm-hmm.
tell us about your projects, how people can support you, and how they can be, connected with you going forward.
It's very good. So I'm pretty new into the consultant space. I've definitely been
Mhm.
public speaking for a while at different conferences and everything. I'm really excited to be going to the National Council of History Education this month in
Mm,
Montgomery. I think that's going to be
mhm,
a fantastic conversation. As you know, America's turning 250 on the 4th of July. And
mhm,
so they replaced one of their keynotes with a panel. And so I'm looking forward to just getting together with other like minded, dynamic, diverse educators and just having that conversation. Like, what does that mean that
yeah,
America's 250?
yeah,
There's been a
yeah.
lot. There's been a lot of history, in that space. So I'm still doing things like that, just
Mhm,
having the conversations, practicing my craft as a teacher,
mhm,
E&I practitioner as well, but then moving into this consulting work with the burnout conversation that you hosted today, which I appreciate,
mhm,
Sheldon. I
mhm,
think the best way for people to kind of connect and support is
mhm.
through LinkedIn,
Okay.
because through LinkedIn, they can easily get to my link tree. do the free consultation and continue the conversation and really think about what they need. I love to do those listening sessions, those virtual
Mhm.
coffee chats, I
Right.
call them. I find them extremely energizing. There's usually a lot of synergy in the room, and I love to hear people's stories just like you. So if someone wanted to send me an email, it's drderekporter@gmail.com,
Mhm.
DRDEREKPORTER@gmail.com. I check my email. I love to hear from people. No conversation is too small. And I always feel like if people have the unction, they should send it. I mean, that's how I got to you. It's just by reaching out. It's
Mhm.
never too cold, right? Every conversation is a warm one to me. And
Yeah.
every person is just a degree of separation. So I always invite the conversation.
Well, thank you. Like, I see amazing things for you going forward. Your vision, your ability to articulate things that escape most people, and your energy and your passion for this work is really going to take you far. I hope that we have more opportunities to collaborate on some stuff going forward. But thank you so much for coming, and I will make sure all that stuff is in the show notes. Thank you again, Derek. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Sheldon.
Okay. Thank you for joining me on another episode of I Must Be BUGN. I hope you felt seen, safe, and celebrated by what you heard today. Don't forget to visit my website, sheldongayesbugn.com, where you can catch all of my episodes, book me to speak, and check out my merch. Don't hesitate to hit me up on socials either. I'm eager to hear your thoughts, your experiences, and your stories. Remember, this podcast is all about sharing humanized narratives about who we are and how we contribute to the beautiful and necessary diversity of humanity. This is our place to unmask and just be. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe. It helps our people find community. So until next time, stay up and enjoy who you were meant to be. Ashe.